With the NBA season just 1 week away, it seems like there's only two directions that teams really want to go in. Either they're trying to tank for Victor Wembanyama, or they're trying to make a deep playoff run. So let's see what direction I really think teams are going to go in this year and dive into my 2023 NBA Eastern Conference standing predictions. So let's just jump right in and start at number 15. I have the Indiana Pacers. They still have some veterans like Turner and Hield on their team, but they've expressed that they want to trade these guys and they clearly want to go into tanking mode. And with Victor Wembanyama being possibly the greatest prospect of all time, they're clearly going to go try to tank for him. I love this team. They have a lot of young talent, but they're just nowhere near good enough to compete in the Eastern Conference this year. They're going to be tanking for Wembanyama. And at 14, I have another team that just really can't compete in the East this year. It's the Hornets. Miles Bridges, we don't know really what's going to go on. We're assuming he's going to miss the whole year. They didn't fix any problems. Their depth got worse. Their defense still is atrocious. They're just going to tank for Wembanyama and try to complete this rebuild once and for all. Next up at 13, it's an interesting one. We have the Orlando Magic. I think this could be a team that could make a play-in push, but I also think at the end of the day, they're just not good enough. They're still too young. They have a lot of young talent on this team. Obviously, they just picked Paolo Banchero. Wendell Carter and Franz Wagner looked amazing last year, but I just don't think they're competitive enough to really be any higher. And ultimately, there's no point for them to make a play-in push. They might as well just go after another great rookie in this year's draft class. And moving on to 12, we have a team that I have a lot of mixed feelings about. It's the Washington Wizards. I could see this team being a potential 7th, 8th, or even 6th seed in the Eastern Conference this year, but ultimately I have them being the 12th seed. I just don't think their defense is good at all. They didn't improve. They actually got worse on the defensive side of the ball. But this year they do have Porzingis playing the entire year, and they'll have Beal playing the entire year. And we saw at the beginning of last year, over like the first 20 games of the season, they were a top 6 seed, and at one point in the NBA were the number 1 seed. But I think that was kind of just like a fluke in the NBA. I don't think they're really a top 6 seed. I think obviously we've seen that they have the potential. I think Beal's obviously an all-star caliber player. I'm really excited about a guy like Deni Avdija, but overall really their defense still kind of sucks, and their three-point shooting isn't phenomenal yet either. And at 11, we have a young team that I think really is competing for a playoff spot, and that's the Detroit Pistons. I absolutely love this team. They brought in some veterans like Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel, which should help them get wins if they decide to not trade them. They have Cade, who's coming off a phenomenal rookie year. They have Saddiq Bey, who I'm absolutely in love with. I think he's be a phenomenal player and eventually will be an all-star caliber player. Maybe not this year, but I think at one point in his career he will be an all-star. They also drafted Jaden Ivey, who is a phenomenal prospect. Him and Cade is be a great backcourt duo. Their front court is solid as well. Bagley looked pretty good when he played last year. Isaiah Stewart, we know, is a very physical center and is a monster in the paint. I really like this team, and I think they could be competitive in the East. Up next at 10, we have a team that I am way lower on than the majority of people. It's the Atlanta Hawks. I just don't see a backcourt of two ball-dominant players like DeJounte Murray and Trae Young really working out too well. I think DeJounte Murray, yes, is a great defensive player, and he got brought in to fix their defensive problems. The Hawks were ranked a bottom 5 defense last year, and the Hawks were ranked a top 5 offense last year. So we already know they're great offensively. And I personally don't think DeJounte Murray is that good of an offensive player. I think that his stats were kind of inflated in San Antonio because he had the ball in his hands all the time. There's really no other ball handlers on that team, so he's going to have the ball in his hands all the time. I think his stats are going to take a bit of a dip this year. I don't think the Hawks have great depth. I don't think they have phenomenal three-point shooting besides a guy like Trae Young. They kind of don't really have another knockdown shooter. They lost Gallinari. They lost Kevin Huerter. They didn't really improve their depth, and I think if we see Trae Young go down, this team's going to start to lose games rapidly. So I'm very worried about this team, but they do have a lot of potential because they are so good offensively, and Trae Young's just a phenomenal player. On to 9, I have my New York Knicks. I think they will be a better team this year. They brought in Jalen Brunson. Rose is coming back off his injury. Those two players will significantly help their offense, which was ranked bottom 10 in the league last year. Their defense was a top 15 ranked defense. I think it won't really go back to that top 5 defense that we saw from them 2 years ago. We just don't have those perimeter defensive players that we had 2 years ago, like Elfrid Payton or Frank Ntilikina. But we do still have a very good interior defense with Mitchell Robinson in the paint, and guy like Jericho Sims, who's a developing young talent who can jump through the roof and is a phenomenal inside defensive player. But really the reason I think they're going to be much better than last year is Julius Randle. I just don't think Randle can have as bad as a year as he had last year. I think that was like the lowest we could possibly see from Randle. That was his worst efficiency season since his rookie year. He was not even that bad in New Orleans. This was by far his worst year in the past 5 years. So I just don't see how Randle could stay that bad or even get worse. I think there's only room to go up. I don't think there's room to go down for Randle from here. And also Barrett and Toppin should develop, as they're still young guys, and even Quickley should develop a little bit as well. I just see this team being a mediocre team though. I don't really think they have the potential to be a top 5 or 4 seed like we saw from them 2 years ago. But I really hope I prove myself wrong, because I'm a Knicks fan and I'd love to see them as a top 5 seed like we were 2 years ago, but I just don't think that's a realistic possibility for us. Next up is really, in my eyes, a boom or bust team. It's the Chicago Bulls. Now, they dealt with some injuries last year to guys like Patrick Williams, who many people are calling an X factor to this team, and I would agree with you. He is an X factor to this team this year. We don't really know what we're going to get with Patrick Williams. If it's really good, the team should be a top 6 seed. If it's really bad, they should be in the play-in. And that's where I have them ranked. I don't think Patrick Williams is going to be some phenomenal player this year. I think he's just going to be, all right. This team does have a lot of good perimeter players, especially on the defensive end. Guys like Lonzo, Caruso, and even Dalen Terry, who they just drafted, who, if you saw my mock draft video a few months ago, you would know I absolutely love Dalen Terry, but I don't see him getting too many minutes with so many guards already on this team. But their interior defense still sucks. Bringing in Andre Drummond won't significantly help their interior defense. Andre Drummond's a great rebounder, but not particularly known for his defense in the paint. Vucevic has not looked good these past few years with Chicago. I just don't see it all coming together for Chicago this year. They don't really have a power forward spot besides Patrick Williams. I just don't like this team too much. I think they're very offensive focused and perimeter defensive focused, but if Lonzo misses significant time, they're definitely gonna struggle. Up next at 7, I have another team that I think has the potential to be a top 6, 5, or even 4 seed in the Eastern Conference, but ultimately won't fulfill that potential. It's the Brooklyn Nets. Now, they have Simmons coming back off of almost 2 years of not playing. We'll see what we get from Ben Simmons. I think he's a huge question mark. I think this team does not have a lot of depth. They brought in a lot of old veteran guys who used to be significant role players on playoff teams, but in the past few years have kind of sucked. Like, I don't think TJ Warren or Royce O'Neal are really too good anymore, or they're not the same players that they used to be. So I don't think we're going to get a lot of those guys. I don't think this team has really any other scorers besides Kyrie and Durant. So if we see some injuries from Kyrie and Durant, this team is going to take a lot of losses. And over the past few years, that's what we've seen from Durant and Kyrie. They miss games in the regular season. So if they miss significant time, they're going to fall in the standings. And that's why I think they're going to be a playing team this year. Up at 6, I have the last year's number 1 seed, the Miami Heat. The reason for this fall off is we just don't really know what we're getting from the Heat year in and year out. We look at 2 seasons ago during the bubble, the Heat were in the finals, and then 3 years ago, the Heat were in the finals. Then 2 years ago, the Heat lost in the first round. And then last year, they were back at the top of the East. This year, they got worse in free agency. They lost PJ Tucker. They didn't bring in any notable names. I just don't see it being another great year for the Miami Heat. I think Butler is a phenomenal player. I love him. I like Lowry. I like Hero a lot. I love Bam. I think he's definitely in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. But I just don't see it all coming together. I don't think this team has phenomenal depth. So that's why I have them so low. Up at 5, we have the team that made the biggest move of the offseason, bringing in Donovan Mitchell and assembling the best backcourt in the entire NBA. It's the Cleveland Cavaliers. Offensively, I think this team will be great, and I think they will be very good defensively. Offensively, they have guys like LeVert and Love coming off the bench, and obviously you have Garland and Donovan Mitchell running the show. They are phenomenal offensive players. Garland is a great scorer but can also set you up, and Mitchell, we just know, is one of the best scorers in the entire NBA, but he is also a very talented passer as well. On the defensive side of things, I don't love this team's perimeter defense. Garland and Mitchell will definitely struggle, but their interior defense is the best in the league. Mobley and Jared Allen in the paint is absolutely unreal. I think teams are going to struggle to get inside and get easy layups on this team with those two guys on the court at the same time. But ultimately, they don't have much of a bench besides LeVert and Kevin Love. Other guys like Cedi Osman are not guys I really want to see getting minutes, but they did just trade a whole bunch of players to get Donovan Mitchell, so it makes sense. But I think depth and perimeter defense will be the reason this team doesn't finish any higher. But I don't see them finishing any lower than a secured playoff spot. I can't see them being even in the play-in. I just don't think that's in the range of outcomes for the Cleveland Cavaliers this year. At 4, we have my favorite sleeper team this year. It's the Toronto Raptors. They have the best coach in the NBA and the most unique team in the NBA. Now let me explain. The Raptors are a small ball team for sure. They run Pascal Siakam at center, who's only 6'9". The reason they're so unique though is that even though they're a small ball team, they focus on their defense, not their offense. That's unusual from a small ball team. Usually these small ball teams are elite offensive teams but struggle defensively. That's not the case for the Toronto Raptors. The Toronto Raptors are a top 10 defensive ranked team last year, and were also a top 15 offensive ranked team last year. They could just do it all, but this defense is absolutely unreal. With Gary Trent and OG Anunoby are two of the best two-way players in the NBA. Scotty Barnes is emerging as one of the best young players in the NBA and one of the best two-way players in the NBA. And Siakam was an All-NBA player last year. Van Vliet was an All-Star last year. I think Siakam will see another huge year for Siakam, and I think he'll take a small step up and will be even better than he was last year. Will finish as an All-NBA player again. I think Scotty Barnes, who was the Rookie of the Year, will take another step up going into his sophomore year and will emerge as a borderline All-Star, if not potentially an All-Star player. I am a little concerned about Van Vliet. I do think that this will be by far the best year of his career. I don't think he can consistently be an All-Star, but I think the jump up for Siakam and Scotty Barnes will cover up for Van Vliet's slight drop-off in production. At 3, I have the team that's gone through the most drama by far this offseason. It's the Boston Celtics. Ime Udoka, their head coach, will miss the entire year. Robert Williams is going to miss significant time in the beginning of the year. But, however, this team was in the finals last year. They did add Malcolm Brogdon, who's by far the most underrated player of the year. People think he's a candidate for the 6th Man of the Year award. That's not true. He won't be coming off the bench. This guy is not a bench player at all. He's obviously going to be taking that starting job from whoever is in his way, whether that be Marcus Smart or if they have to run a small ball lineup and put Horford at the 5 now that Robert Williams is out. No matter what, Brogdon will be starting. He averaged 20 points a game, 6 assists, 5 rebounds last year. He's an obvious starter. I think it is a great addition by the Celtics. They did lose a little bit of depth, which is a little bit concerning, but Tatum, Brown, Brogdon, Smart, Horford, and Robert Williams when he comes back, Grant Williams, they still have a very good team, and I'm not too concerned about this Boston Celtics squad. The only reason I don't have them higher is the fact that Robert Williams is missing some time, and I think that will affect the record. At 2, I have the Bucks. I think they would have won the championship last year if they were healthy. I think that's all that matters for them. We know what we're getting from guys like Giannis, Middleton, and Holiday. We know how good this team can be. I don't think there needs to be a lot said about this Milwaukee Bucks squad. We know they're championship contenders. I think they're going to be hungry this year, and they're my number 1 team to win the championship this year. I think if Middleton stayed healthy last year, they would have won it all last year. And at 1, I have the Philadelphia 76ers. I think if they don't make a deep playoff run this year, it's time to start getting concerned and worried about the Sixers. They have Embiid, who is the MVP runner-up 2 years in a row now. Harden will be playing a full year with them, and I think he'll be much improved from last year. Maxey should only get better. Tobias Harris is still on the squad. They added in PJ Tucker and DeAnthony Melton. I think this is one of the deepest teams in the NBA. I think this is one of the best offensive and defensive teams in the NBA. I'm really excited about the Sixers. So that does it for my 2023 Eastern Conference predictions. If you have any disagreements or you just have some questions, please feel free to leave a comment. I will get back to you in the comment section. Please leave a like, please subscribe, and hopefully I see you in the next video. Thank you so much for listening.